Okay, this is going to be a dark video, so turn it off now if you don't want dark vibes. This is a prediction for the future as of December 13th, 2021. This is what I believe will happen in the future. So, Donald Trump is going to win the presidential election in 2024. He will win pretty easily, the way I see it. Because the Democrats aren't going to learn anything. They're going to follow the same pattern that they've been following, where they put up the same candidates they always put up. They're either going to rerun Biden, or they're going to run Kamala Harris, or they're going to run Pete Buttigieg, or they're going to run somebody who will symbolically represent the same exact thing that they always run, right? They're not going to learn. They're going to do the same behavior pattern. And so Donald Trump will just display the same behavior pattern he displayed in 2016, and he will easily defeat the candidate that they put up in 2024. He just has to do the same thing he did in 2016. And he'll win with ease, I imagine, the same way that he won with ease in 2016, really, if you think about it. And the election in 2020 was pretty close between him and Biden. And I think after 4 years of Biden, it's going to be a pretty tough sell on the blue team, no matter who they put up. So anyway, Trump is going to win. Trump is going to win in 2024. Or whoever Trump blesses. And either way, it will either be Trump or somebody that looks exactly like Trump or behaves like Trump. So here's what I think is going to happen. Here's where it gets dark. When Trump wins, there will be protests on the blue team. In the days leading up to him taking office, and especially as he takes office, there will be protests. These protests will look exactly like the protests that happened over George Floyd in 2020. These protests will be BLM themed. They will be anti-fascist themed, anti-racist, anti-fascist. Because what's going to happen, as Trump is taking office, the narrative on the blue team will be the same as it was in 2016, the same as it's been always since Trump became a character in the storyline here. The narrative is just Trump is a dog-whistling white supremacist. He's bringing out the white supremacists from the woodwork. He's a fascist dictator. He's a threat to democracy. You know, all of the same storylines about Trump will just pop right back up. They'll just pick up from where they left off, pretty much. And so what will happen as he takes office will be protests in the streets that are going to look exactly like the protests from 2020. And what's going to happen is these protests will occur in the same places that they did in 2020, like Portland, Seattle, Los Angeles, New York. All of the left-leaning cities is going to be where the protests will happen. And as they did in 2020, they will start out during the day. So this is going to happen over days, many, many days in a row. There's going to be protests every single day. And as we've seen in 2020, as what was already demonstrated in 2020, these protests start out peaceful during the day. They start out as a perfectly reasonable exercising of a constitutional right to protest. Right? They're going to be expressing their unhappiness with the situation, which they are perfectly legally and constitutionally protected to do. However, like what happened in 2020, the sun goes down and the nature of the protest changes, the quality of the protest changes, the crowd changes. The good people go home and the bad people come out. This happened over and over again in 2020, and what will happen at night is they'll start smashing things and burning things. And what will happen, like happened in 2020, the local leaders will not do anything about it, because what's going to happen, the narrative will be, stop Trump at all costs. It's going to be stop Trump at all costs. Trump is a white supremacist, dog-whistling, fascist dictator. We need to stop him. He's a threat to democracy. So these protests will be, it'll be the same conversation over again. It'll be like, you can destroy property. Property is not human lives. This is a valid expression of discontent, so we must let it happen. This is a voice for the unheard. It'll be the same defenses that they used in 2020. So what's going to happen is they're going to force Trump into a position here, because Trump is going to have to respond to these protests, to this violence. There's going to be things being burned and smashed. Trump will give a speech. This will happen. This will for sure happen. He'll be forced to give this speech. Trump will give a speech that will be the law and order speech. It will be like, we're going to crack down, I'm going to deploy troops, it's crackdown time, we're protecting property, law and order. So This speech is going to sound exactly like the speech that a fascist dictator would give. It's going to play perfectly into the narrative of the blue team. They're going to play clips of that speech. They're going to pick out the 1 or 2 clips where he says the thing that sounds the most like a fascist dictator. That is going to circulate around the echo chambers of the blue team, and it's going to propagate the narrative forward. It's going to encourage more people to protest. So what's going to happen is these protests will be more prevalent. They'll happen every single day. They'll be more prevalent. They'll get more intense. The violence that happens at night will get more intense. And Trump's hand will be forced. He will have to respond with federal troops or something that looks like federal troops, because the local leaders are going to prevent local law enforcement from doing anything. The federal troops will have to step in, and these troops will symbolize Donald Trump. They will be symbols of the fascist regime, according to the blue team narrative. So, these violent protests will be happening at night, and they will be met with federal troops. Video will be taken of federal troops beating up BLM members. God forbid a white guy in a federal uniform who symbolically represents Trump beats up a black guy and it is caught on video. This video and videos like this will circulate around blue team echo chambers, propagate the narrative forward. The narrative will be there's a military police state, and it will look exactly like a military police state on video. It will be easy for this to propagate the narrative forward. This will cause more protests. This will cause more violence. There'll have to be an even harder crackdown on Trump. Trump will have to continue giving speeches where he talks about law and order. He'll start to look more and more like a military police state fascist dictator. This will play perfectly into the hand of the blue team. The violence will continue. The violence will continue. The crackdown will continue. This is what's going to happen in 2024. So predicting what happens at this moment is difficult, but what I see happening is further radicalization of both teams. The people on the blue team will become more radicalized. The people on the red team will become more radicalized. You're going to see things like the Waukesha parade incident where that guy ran over 40 people, killed like 5 or 6 people. That was a political radical. He did that because he was radicalized by this narrative. So what we saw there and what we've seen in 2020 is small in comparison to what we will see in 2024. What's going to happen in 2024 is going to be 10 to 100 times more intense than what we've seen so far. People will be radical. There'll be even more radicals. And so there's 2 things going on here. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. It's social media radicalizing people through echo chambers. It's this narrative that is basically forcing Trump's hand. Trump will be forced to become more of a fascist by the anti-fascists. It's some sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, the way that I see it. And it's only going to be a matter of time until the violence becomes extreme, until somebody who is very radical steps up and does something very extreme. The power of the individual is simply too high as it currently stands for this not to occur. The incentive is for it to occur, and the power is there. All it takes is for one person, premeditated, like the Waukesha parade thing. It was somewhat of a premeditated attack, and that was spurred on by Kyle Rittenhouse's acquittal. And like I said, that is tiny in comparison. It's small in comparison to what will happen in 2024. Somebody is going to show up to one of these protests with a gun or a bomb and do something extreme. There will be a moment of extreme violence from one team or the other. It's hard. I don't know which one, but somebody's going to do some major damage to something or somebody somehow, using a powerful weapon of some sort. It won't be a car. They might keep trying to run people over, but I imagine somebody's going to get their hands on a powerful gun or just construct a bomb and do something extreme. And you might think that I'm like a doomer. You might think that I'm exaggerating here, but you have to imagine the intensity. Remember the most intense moment of the George Floyd protests. Remember that most intense moment. That is a fraction of the intensity that we will experience in 2024. And that intensity will be amplified by social media echo chambers. There will be more radicals than we've ever had before in this country, on the red and the blue team. And, well, radicals do violent things. Violence will occur. It will be dangerous. And Trump will be in power this whole time. So it's going to look a lot like a fascist police state because they're going to have to crack down. The only way to prevent violence is to crack down further. And this will just play more and more into the hands of the narrative on the blue team. So this is what's going to happen. This is my dark prediction for the future. This is why I'm so obsessed with the Forward Party. I think the only way out of this is to take a step out of the duopoly. The only way to stop the radicalization of the red and the blue is to create more colors. That's what I think. That's, in my opinion, the morally superior position now is the outside of the duopoly position. If you are in the blue team or in the red team, you are now in a morally inferior position. That will become clear in 2024. It should be clear to you now. Unfortunately, it's not clear to most people. But it will be. It will be. At some point, the violence will become so extreme, the radicalization will be so extreme, that people will be forced to wake up and recognize that the duopoly is truly the problem. So, you know, like I do with all these videos, I come back around to the Forward Party and to Andrew Yang, but really we need a way out of the duopoly dynamic, and he seems to be the only one providing us with a way out. Nobody else is going to do it. Because what's going to happen is Trump will be in power, there'll be extreme violence, there will be people on the blue team calling for an end to the violence, but they won't be able to provide a viable alternative. What are they going to be able to do? Trump will be in power, and the violence will occur early on in his term. So, given the rules of the Constitution, given the laws that we are following, we will have to wait at least 4 years. Trump will be in power for 4 years, and so whatever the solution is that's presented after it gets extremely violent, because I assume the violence will have to stop at some point. It will become so extreme. Some event will occur that will be so extreme that it will wake people up. It's inevitable. There's going to be a moment where people get snapped out of it. At least most people will. And then ideally, the mainstream view will be, ideally, in an optimistic world, the moral superiority of being outside of the duopoly will become the mainstream position. We will start looking down on those who are stuck on red or stuck on blue. That is the future that I see. Because otherwise, the violence will just get to a point where something along the lines of a civil war will occur, or a national divorce, or something, but that just doesn't seem reasonably possible to me. There's no line you can draw through the country or anything. You can't physically create two countries. We can't just split somehow, so yeah, the duopolistic dynamic occurs. It'll keep radicalizing people. Trump will be in power, and the blue team will do something crazy, or somebody on the red team will go to one of these protests and shoot a bunch of blue team people. Somebody somewhere is going to do something extreme. And at that point, that will get people out of the duopoly, hopefully. But until then, we're stuck. We're stuck headed in this direction. We're stuck headed towards the inevitable violent outcome. That's what I think. This is the darkness that I see ahead. This is why I'm obsessed with the Forward Party. It all just seems inevitable to me. It seems like Trump wins, blue team responds, Trump has to respond to blue team responding, and then it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's just like a little reaction chain that will occur and just get more and more extreme. And I don't know how else it can possibly play out. I don't know if people will have calmed down by then. I don't know what the view is on Trump by then. I don't know if they will respond so radically to Trump being in power. It seems unlikely to me that the people on the left are going to be able to stand Trump for another 4 years. They barely stayed sane during 2016 to 2020. Barely. I mean, arguably they didn't stay sane at all. At all, because, I mean, look at the world we're in now. Look at this. We lost our minds over COVID. COVID was the greatest terrorist attack of all time. I said this in my video about vaccines, but the damage that COVID inflicted physically is far less than the damage that we inflicted on ourselves. It seems to me that our society is in a state of a panicked animal. We are similar to a flailing wild animal at this moment. The way that we have responded to COVID, we did far more damage to ourselves than the virus ever could have done. So if the virus was a terrorist, it was very successful. Very successful. And if our reaction to COVID was any indicator of what will happen to our reaction when Trump wins, we're going to flail like a wild animal. The country's going to flail around. We're going to remain unstable. And things are going to get violent. That's just what is going to happen. I don't know how, I'm typically an optimistic person. I do see solutions for it. I mean, again, my solution is vote for the Forward Party. And I think that ideally people wake up to that solution. But as it stands right now, it seems like the vast majority of the country is stuck on red or blue. So we're stuck headed in this direction. So yeah, it's why I'm out here. I am far away from a city. I was in LA and I left because I knew what was going to happen. So it still seems inevitable that it will happen. So anyway, happy Monday. That's all for today. Bye.